All right, thank you all for joining us this afternoon for the Machine Learning 2 panel. In order to give all the speakers plenty of time, we're just going to start right here at 1:30. So our first speaker is Nicholas Prolax, and he'll be speaking about reinforcement learning, a package for replicating human behavior in R. So thanks.
Thank you very much. My name is Nicholas Prolax. I'm a final year PhD student from the University of Freiburg, which is a relatively small town in southern Germany. And the package I will talk about today is called reinforcement learning. And yeah, the intention of this package is to replicate human behavior in R. This presentation is separated in two parts. In the first part, I will just briefly repeat the main concepts of reinforcement learning, and in the second part I will present the package using a case study, a small case study. So what is reinforcement learning and why is it so special? In fact, reinforcement learning has recently gained a lot of traction in studies that perform human-like learning. And reinforcement learning basically learns an optimal behavior for a so-called agent through trial and error interactions with a dynamic environment. And the interesting thing about reinforcement learning is now that this approach appears quite natural because it mimics the fundamental way humans learn. There are many applications out there. I will name a few in the following. One example is robotics and production control. Second might be finance and economics. For example, if you want to learn an agent that performs stock market trading, that's one example. And the third one is artificial intelligence in general. One popular or famous example in this case is the Atari paper from Google DeepMind, where they learned playing Atari games even above the human level, just based on the input pixels. So how does it work? The reinforcement learning problem is as follows. In contrast to supervised learning, we just have a feedback signal, or the feedback of the agent is restricted to a reward signal that indicates how well the agent is behaving. But any instruction regarding how to improve its behavior is not there. So we just have this reward signal, but not, and the agent have to learn on itself how to improve its behavior. So formally, we have got an agent, and we have got an environment, and we have got different time steps, and at each time step, the agent observes the state of, so-called state of the environment. For example, if you think about a robot who has to navigate on a grid, the current state could be, for example, its current location on that grid. And after the agent observes the state of the environment, he is able to take an action. For example, in the case of such a robot on a grid, he can move up, right, down, or left, or something like that. And then this has direct effects on the environment. For example, the robot is at a new location after he moves right or down, or something like that. And in addition to the next state, the agent also gets a reward from the environment. For example, if the task is for an agent to move to a goal position, he might get a positive reward if he's at a certain goal position, and in all other cases he might get a negative reward or a zero reward. And then the goal for the agent is to maximize this reward, to come to the goal position as fast as possible in order to get the maximal possible reward. So the result of the learning, of the reinforcement learning method, is a so-called state action function that defines the value of each action in each state of the environment. And based on this state action policy, we can derive an optimal policy that defines the best possible action in each state. So let's think about the agent. The agent is at a certain position, and he has 4 options to move left, down, right, up. And at the end of the learning process, the agent knows which one to choose and which one is best, and this is the policy or the optimal policy, if it's the best possible action. So there are two more terms that are relevant for the package, which comes in the next part. First one is experience replay, and experience replay is basically allows reinforcement learning agents to remember and reuse experiences from the past, and this can speed up convergence because the observed state or the state transition tuples are repeatedly played to the agent, and for example, if you have some states that are visited only rarely, you can overcome this using experience replay because you replay the same transitions multiple times to the agent. And there's a second term which is called batch reinforcement learning, which is of course closely related to experience replay. This means you collect sample sequences from the environment, and then you use these sample sequences to learn an optimal policy, and then you can use this policy to then you can collect new experience from the live system using the learned policy, and you can collect new data points to improve the current policy or to improve the live system. And this is a very good option in cases where you're not able to directly interact with the environment because maybe it's in production and you have got high costs, so you can't afford just to do trial and error. And in these cases, you can first collect sample sequences, then learn a policy, and then validate the policy on the live system or run it there. So next is the package. So what's the motivation for the package? Yeah, as I already said, we think that reinforcement learning is a highly interesting method because it's also highly interpretable and it can generate new insights for research and practice. However, the available tools in R are not living up to the needs of researchers and practitioners, and in fact there's no tool, there's no package for performing reinforcement learning in R available. And the goal of our package is now to close this gap. So what are the main features of this package? First is that we learn optimal policy from a fixed set of known transition samples. You can think of this, it's basically batch reinforcement learning. And we have got a number of predefined learning rules and action selection modes, and we also offer a highly customizable framework which allows to perform model-free reinforcement learning. So how can you install the package? You can install the package via CRAN, just using the install packages command and the library command, and you can also get the latest updates via GitHub. Okay, I will start with the data format, which is required for running the package, because I think it's much easier to start with knowing how the data must be presented in order to perform the learning than the other way around, at least in this case. So, as I already said, we perform batch reinforcement learning, and what we need are state transition tuples, which consist of 4 elements. First, we have got the current state of the environment, for example, the current position of a robot on a grid. Then we have observed an action of the robot, for example, he moves right. This means this is A in this case. And then we have a next state as new, which is, for example, which is the result of the action based on the state. For example, if an agent is in 1-1 coordinates and he moves up, then he might be in 2-1 or something like that. And then he also gets a reward. In the grid example, it would be a 0 reward or negative reward if he's not in the goal position at this new state, or a positive reward if the agent has reached some kind of goal position. So that's the required input format. And for the package, this state transition tuples must be in a data frame where each row represents such a tuple. How does it look like? You can see an example on the right. This data set is also part of the package. Here we have got game states from the game Tic-Tac-Toe. We can just load this data using the data command. And as you can see, we have the current state on the left, and we have some kind of action, and we have the next state and the reward on the right. So it's just this format as we have seen on the last slide. There's also a lot of documentation online, but it's just to make it a little bit clearer. So that's the first option to generate experience. The second one is to generate experience using a so-called environment function. So in this case, we require a data set that's already collected from another source, for example. But of course, if we know that the dynamics of the environment, we can also sample new experience. And I will demonstrate this in a case study in the next slides. But just to make it a little bit clearer or easier to understand, such an environment function has to have the following structure. We have a function which takes a state and action as an input, and then is doing something, and the result of this function or the output should be the next state and the reward. And then, of course, we end up with this state transition tuples, as you can see on the top. So state, action, next state, reward, just these columns. Okay. I know it's a lot to bring together, and it might be not that easy. That's why I will continue with a small case study, just with this grid world example. Here we have got an agent that has to navigate from a random starting position on a grid, on a 2x2 grid, to a goal position. So as you can see in the figure on the bottom, we have got these two states, S1, S2, S3, S4, and the agent has to move from S1 to S4, or from each arbitrary state to S4. And there's a wall between S1 and S4 to make it a bit more complicated, and there's also a wall around the grid. And if the agent reaches the goal position, it gets a reward of 10, otherwise -1. So the states are given on the right. We have got 4 states and 4 actions. So now we want to use an environment function instead of pre-collected data. And how can this look like? It's of course a very, very simple example. We would have a state and an action as an input, and then in this function, we would calculate the next state based on the input. For example, if we are in state 1 and we take action down, we are then in state 2, and so on. And we get a reward, a positive reward, if we are in state 4. Otherwise, we get a negative reward. Good. And then there's a function which is called sample experience, which just uses this environment function, and we can and allows us to generate sample experience based on this. I have to hurry up a little bit. So the most important thing now is, which is also the last thing I think, is we want to use this generated experience, may come from pre-collected data or from an environment function, to perform reinforcement learning. And we just call the reinforcement learning command, put this data in, and some control parameters. You can find it online, and we are able to learn the model. So and the result of the reinforcement learning command looks as follows. You can see on the right the state action function and the policy for each, and the optimal policy. And you can see, okay, that's good. We learned the optimal policy because if we're in state 1, we move down, and if we're in state 2, we move right, and in S3, we move up. So that's the optimal policy, and it's learned very quickly. How much time is left? No time. 1 minute. Okay, great. I will leave this out. We can also then use this policy to update our, to sample new experience and to update our existing model. We can also create nice plots. So a short summary. This package allows an agent to learn optimal behavior based on this sample experience. There are 2 options. We can use pre-collected data, or we can implement environment function. And this package is also highly flexible. and easily applied to a wide range of different problems. And the package is available online. So that's it. Thank you very much.